Yo, what up? It's your boy. Remember like 2 years ago when I said I was going to make some videos about cymbals? Here you go, right on time. I'm just going to make some informational like tutorial content about cymbal stuff. I have a few ideas for what I'm going to talk about, but I'm also open to suggestions. A lot of this, at least my goal for a lot of these videos, is not to be prescriptive about like this is the way that juggling is done, but more so to give just a variety of like information and perspectives and be like, this is how you can approach cymbals, you know? So like what I'm talking about today, this isn't like this is the way juggles work. It's more so just like this is a cool concept that you can use to like as a manner of thinking about how cymbals works, right? So up to you what information you like and what you don't like. And if you disagree with me, definitely let me know because I love hearing your perspectives. So the first topic I wanted to talk about was something I think is super cool, which is early catch and late catch. Essentially every single like basic juggle, which for this I'm defining as like stuff that rotates like a foop and a gasp basically, which might be gibberish to you. So I'm talking like spagasp, foop, grand, any type of gasp, bing bong, stir, reverse stir, strapless, and like any variations of that sort of stuff, right? And essentially every single one of these juggles has two variations of how it actually rotates around your hand and how many rotations it does. An early catch does one rotation and a late catch does 1.5 rotations relative to your hand, with one exception. A foop does 1.5 for early and 2 for late. Go ahead and ask me why. I don't know why. That's just how it is. So I'll use this spagasp as an example because if you're familiar with juggles, this might be something you've already just like kind of come across in the wild, right? Specifically with teaching other people spagasp. So if you know how to do one, you might do something like that, right? Notice how my thumb is on the pad side, and then I do the spagasp, and now my thumb is on the knot side. So that's 1.5 rotations, right? So sometimes what might happen is you try and teach someone spagasp, and you're like, you're gonna do this, and they're like, got it, cool. And they do that, and you're like, that looked different from what I did. Thumb's on the pad side. When I do it, thumb's still on the pad side. That's only one rotation, right? It's easier to see if I do it like this. So a late catch, as you can see, it does like 1.5 rotations. See how the pad's facing out and now the pad's facing in, right? So that's 1.5 versus if I do the early catch. It's kind of hard to catch it like perfectly perpendicular to the ground like that, but you notice that's like 1, right? So this is essentially the difference between early catch and late catch, and this applies to many different kinds of juggles. And essentially it's two different ways to approach the same juggle as like to respect to like how your hand is actually placed and where you're catching it, right? And to get ahead of anyone, yes, this is usually just called like a Ric Flair, but I think they're both like spagasps technically, at least to me. So the way that every single like the technique for it works and how you actually achieve it is the same for every juggle that rotates like a gasp, and then every juggle rotates like a foop is the same way as well. So to talk about that, so for the way a late catch to gasp works is if you notice how my hand is placed when I do it, notice how the cymbal is rotating around my entire hand like and wrist, right? So as it goes around here, my entire hand is inside the cymbal, right? And so what that does is when it's inside, what the way it wants to catch is like this. So it catches on pad side when you started on knot side, right? I said that wrong, you know what I mean? The other way around. And then for an early catch, if you watch, what happens is it only rotates around these 4 fingers, and then your thumb is on the outside of the cymbal. So it's going to look something like this, where notice how the thumb is on the outside, and it's only rotating around 4 fingers because then it's going to catch here, right? So watch the thumb placement. So this is going to be for a late catch. Watch where my thumb is during this rotation. Notice how it's on the inside and then catches at the end, and then watch my thumb for this one. Notice how it's on the outside and then it catches on the pad, right? And this applies to every single juggle that rotates like a gasp, right? Which, if you know, you know. I'll probably talk about it in another video. So take like a grand, for instance, right? And there's a few ways to approach a grand. No arguing allowed in my comment section. I'm a respectable YouTuber here on youtube.com. So either people do a grand like that, or they do a grand like that. Those are both the late catch versions because they're technically 1.5 rotations. Because if you think about it, if your hand is here and then you were to move it to here, it's technically the thumb on top. And then when you do the grand, you're going to end here, the thumb on the pad, or sorry, the knot side. So it's 1.5. So you might be like, what's the early catch version of that look like? Looks like that, which looks wonky. No one really does that. The other version is a little bit more familiar. So like with this kind of grand, if you do an early catch of that, this is a juggle that's like been done before. That's in books, right? So like that versus that, right? So that much makes sense. So those work. And then there's with the other ones, so like for a stir, for instance, so like a normal, it's not really a normal stir, people do both, but like as you can see, my thumb's on the knot side, still on the knot side, right? That's actually 1 rotation. Or if I do it from here, it's a lot easier to see. That's 1 rotation. Versus if I do a late catch, notice how now my thumb is on the pad side, right? Thumb's on pad side. So his thumb's on pad side, thumb's on not side, right? That's 1.5 rotations, right? And then the last one, I guess, like bing bongs, right? So if I do a bing bong like this, as you can see, thumb starts here on pad side, not side. Now it's on not side, pad side. That's late catch, 1.5 rotations. And during all these, you can watch my thumb and you can see where it is during the juggle because it operates the same way every time. And then for early catch, right, watch my thumb during this as well. Thumb's just on the outside. That's 1 rotation, right? And it works the same if you're going forward. Ooh. That's funky, right? And then for late catch, notice how thumb goes on the inside, does 1.5 rotations, right? So it's all kind of function like the same way, which is pretty cool. Foops are a little bit weirder and a lot harder. So for a normal foop, usually if you just do a normal one like the way anyone would do it, and you caught it back here at your side, that's 1.5 rotations. That's how my thumb is on the pad side. Now thumb's on the not side, right? So 1.5. Versus a late catch, which looks like that. So now thumb's on pad side again, right? Or the other way to show it is I can do that versus that. So the way you achieve this is not the same, unfortunately, as gas. So with an early catch hoop, it's the same way, where when I do it, notice how my thumb is going to be on the outside here. The fingers are on the inside. Catch is on the same side, right? Or not on the same side, but on not side. Versus the way that you do it for late catch is way weirder. What you do is you approach it, and then instead of going around the entire hand, you're going to go around only the thumb. And it's going to do something like that, right? So it's going to rotate this way. Only my thumb is there. It's going to do something like that, right? So watch my thumb when I do this juggle. See how it's kind of like rotating around only my thumb? It's very, very strange. It's a very weird sensation. The other way to show it, by the way, so like you can also do a foop like this, right? This one is 1 rotation for early catch and 1.5 for late. So this one makes sense. Versus if I do late catch like that, that one's really, really tricky, as you can see. So that one's 1.5, right? And so every juggle that rotates like a foop is the same way, right? So if I do a strapless, for instance, strapless is 1 and 1.5 for rotations for early and late. Thumb's currently on not side, and it's on not side again, right? So that makes sense. If you do the late catch, so when I get to here, it's going to rotate around the thumb here, right? As you can see now, thumb lands on pad side, right? That was messy, sorry. There we go. All that, and then finally, by far the most challenging one out of anything I've shown in this video is for reverse stirs. This really sucks. Normally people do it like this. That's an early catch version, right? Or you can just do it like that, I guess. For the late catch, you have to rotate it, and then your thumb's going to get on the inside, so you can do it like that, which looks like that. This really, really sucks. It's very hard. That one's very tricky. There might be another way to approach it. If you have any other way that you know how to approach that, let me know. I would like to know, because that really sucks. So that's mostly how early catch and late catch works. I'll give some more extra info about it, then I'll explain why it even matters, right? So another important thing about it is that it doesn't like duplicate over like doubles and triples, if that makes sense. The way you catch only impacts the actual last rotation of like a continued juggle. So to explain what I mean, if you were to do a double spagaps, right, this is a late catch. So as you can see, that's technically 2.5 rotations because you're doing 1.5 from the spagaps. The double only adds 1 rotation. And so when you do an early catch, it's not like it's half a rotation times 2 that's gotten rid of because you're doing a double. It's still only half a less rotation, right? So notice how when I do a double, for late catch, thumb's still on pad side, that's 2.5 rotations. If I do early catch after a double, thumb is on, pad side. And so it's just only still half a less rotation, so it's 2 rotations. So why does this matter? I think, for one, the juggles look very clearly different, right? So like, for instance, if you were to do something like that versus something like that, those just look different, right? They have a different style to them depending on what you want. Another one is that depending on where your hand is placed when you catch it, you can just do different things. One of my favorite things is like for a spagass, if you were to catch, catch late and then try and like fold this way, it feels not good and it looks kind of weird. Whereas if you catch early, as you can see, that flows like really, really, really smoothly. It's very, very nice, right? So there's just different like things you can do with them. Another example is like, there's this thing I really like, which is like a flick back sort of motion that you can really only do from early catch. If you try and do it from a late catch, it just doesn't feel good, right? So those are pretty important like reasons why you might want to do one versus the other. The last one is like placement of the pad relative to your hand in case you need it in a certain way. Let's say you wanted to do a spagasp and you wanted to land here specifically so that the pad's on this side, so you can do that. I don't know, just as an example. And let's say you're here. If you do a normal spagasp, as you can see, pad's now over here, so you have to do that. Maybe you just don't want that for some reason. But instead, if you do an early catch, now the pad's on that side, right? And that might be useful to you in some way. So if you ever do a juggle and you're like, oh, the strap or the pad's on the wrong side, you can just do the other variation of the juggle and it'll fix itself, right? Sorry, I'm just thinking. I guess that's mostly it. Yeah. So yeah, I just think it's a really cool concept. There's like a lot of variation that you can do with it. There's also a lot of other ways to like change the rotation or like how much you're rotating a cymbal, which I'll probably talk about in other videos. Like I just showed off, like, you know, doubles and triples, obviously, or just continuous. There's regrasps. There's different types of palm spins and wrist spins. That stuff I'll probably talk about in a different video. But yeah, I just figured I'd start off with something I think is really cool. I'm going to continue to make some more videos. If you have any suggestions, let me know. See ya.